If you want to find the biggest concentration of people talking about attachment on the internet, attachment-focused Facebook groups are where it's at. There are several groups with tens of thousands of members that engage in active discussions every day. These groups can be useful, but they might also be keeping you stuck. In this video, I'm going to share my experiences with these groups. I'm going to do a deep dive analysis like nothing you've ever heard before, including 7 ways the groups may be keeping you stuck. And then I'll offer my suggestions on what we can do about it. And just to make it clear, I'm focusing on Facebook, but the same can apply to any forum on the internet like subreddits or Discord servers. Hello and welcome to Attachment Maps. My name is Carl and I've been learning about attachment since 2018. I'm here to talk about things no one else is talking about. So here's my own personal story with attachment-focused Facebook groups and some of the good they can do. Years ago, toward the end of my relationship with a dismissing girlfriend, I joined a couple Facebook groups. I was able to share my relationship experiences and find others who had almost identical experiences. And going through the difficult breakup process, it was encouraging to see that I was far from being the only person going through this, that what I went through was typical, and there were many others who faced the same problems I did. These groups helped me feel seen, heard, and understood. And soon after, I was reading books on attachment, listening to podcasts, and helping others get through their difficult relationship issues. But after some time, I started to get the sense that I was growing out of these groups, that the groups were no longer rewarding to participate in. Posts started becoming tedious. Many of the questions were repetitive, extremely uninformed, or had little to do with attachment theory at all. Some posts were tragic and emotionally exhausting, people stuck in bad relationships but not having the strength to leave them. And increasingly, the posts were anonymous. And if I did want to comment on a post, it was often the case that the comment section became flooded, leading me to wonder if it was even worth my time to contribute anything. But, committed to doing something helpful, I tried to move away from offering comments to something that could reach more people, sharing what I had learned in educational posts. Unfortunately, it mostly fell on deaf ears, and I felt stuck in the trenches of the comment sections again. That's one reason why I started this YouTube channel, to reach more people with educational content on a platform that's actually more geared towards that. But I've stayed in these groups, some for 7 years now, and it's been like a puzzle I've been trying to solve, a code to crack. And I'm coming to the conclusion that these groups, while helpful to some degree, might actually be keeping a lot of people stuck. There are roughly 7 reasons why I think that, but before I get into that, let me set the stage and give you an idea of where I'm coming from on this. If you know anything about psychology, then you'd know that if you threw 10,000 insecurely attached lay people into a Facebook group, they're going to naturally think and behave like a group of insecurely attached lay people. You'd see defense mechanisms, self-sabotage, members getting drawn into enactments, poor communication, emotional dysregulation, and cognitive distortions. These ways of thinking and behaving are largely unconscious, automatic behaviors, and they're inevitably going to make an impact on the group's dynamics. It's the same if you threw 10,000 cats into a gymnasium. There will be very distinct, predictable cat behaviors that will emerge. That's what these groups are like. And now let's say you are one of these 10,000 insecure lay people, and you are thrown into the role of offering help and advice to other members. Without a proper education or experience, you'd probably make a lot of rookie mistakes, mistakes that even therapists would make. A lot of your first instincts would be to do things you think would be helpful, but in reality aren't. And since you're insecurely attached, you also wouldn't have done the personal work of working out your own issues, learning to regulate your emotions, developing mindful awareness of your own feelings, thoughts, and behaviors, and learning to communicate in a helpful way. So, despite your best intentions, you're going to succumb, probably, to some of the predictable errors that even therapists make. And if you don't know what kinds of mistakes new therapists make, well, here are a few. Trying to fix a client's problem by giving them answers, opinions, and advice, rather than holding space and allowing them to find their own solutions. More on that shortly. Ignoring transference and countertransference. These are the often subtle ways that the therapist and the client activate each other's blind spots during a session. If the therapist isn't aware of these subtle dynamics, they may fall into an enactment. When it comes to attachment specifically, therapists are often tempted to collude with their clients' dismissing or preoccupied strategies without even being conscious of it. Specifically, they might avoid challenging their dismissing client or try to indulge or rescue their preoccupied client. So, in other words, the idea here is that a group of insecurely attached laypeople will, over time, engage in predictable behaviors and thinking patterns that reflect their lack of security, lack of education, and lack of experience. And without active intervention by dedicated, sharp, and experienced members, it will be a self-perpetuating cycle. That being said, let's get to the specific ways these groups might be keeping you stuck. Enabling dependence. These groups are primarily based on people posting their romantic relationship situations, asking for advice, and people offering their advice. This sounds great on the surface, but can keep you stuck. Therapists are actually trained to limit advice. Why? Well, there are actually a lot of reasons for this, but there are a couple really relevant ones here. The first is because advice bypasses the actual mechanism of change. Healing happens when a person explores their emotions, beliefs, and behaviors. This is a process of connecting dots, facing difficult truths, making sense of past experiences, and reconfiguring identity. When a client is supported by their therapist in self-exploration, they learn new skills and become more independent, leading them to trust themselves more and to feel more empowered. Eventually, the client meets their goals and no longer needs the therapist. But if you're in a Facebook group seeking advice and you receive it in droves, you miss the opportunity to become more resourceful and you become more and more dependent on others. And over time, this dependence can lead to entitlement. Before you know it, you're using your Facebook group as a search engine to ask the absolute most basic questions that you could have Googled yourself. You seek advice and approval for everyday decisions instead of trusting your own judgment. You treat strangers online as if they were your closest confidants instead of going out and making friends in real life. And people are just too eager to enable this cycle. They're eager to offer their opinions on your relationship, even if they don't know that much about attachment theory or the details of your situation. And let's be honest, a lot of these posts are vague and lack context. It feels good. People enjoy being heroes and saviors. It feels good to try to rescue or fix someone else. It feels good to be opinionated and to contribute useful knowledge. And success is measured by good feelings and how much advice is given out instead of actual outcomes. This dynamic isn't new. It's reflected in many homeless charities where success is measured by how many meals are given out rather than by how many people no longer need assistance. The same goes for attachment support Facebook groups. Are we measuring our success by how much advice we are giving out, or by how many people are growing and becoming secure. Enabling the outside-in orientation. In the book Attachment Disturbances in Adults, Treatment for Comprehensive Repair, authors Brown and Elliott refer to something they call an outside-in orientation. This is the preoccupied person's hypervigilant habit of focusing on the state of mind of those around them instead of their own internal experience. Assuming that most of the people in attachment groups are preoccupied, it makes sense that we'd see a lot of attention given to understanding their partner's behavior and motivations, and little attention given to understanding their own thoughts, feelings, needs, and assumptions. And that's exactly what we see. A significant amount of posts are about understanding partners. While there's nothing wrong with understanding other people, it often comes at the expense of understanding yourself. It's another reason why people love giving advice in these groups. They can keep their focus on someone else. And the lack of focus on your inner world can keep you stuck. Healing can never come from analyzing another person's motivations, intentions, or behaviors. A lack of focus on your inner world can look like psychic equivalence, when you have trouble telling your perceptions apart from reality. It can look like inconsistency, when you complain about your partner doing things that you also do but simply aren't aware of. And it can look like low affective granularity. This is when emotional experience is described using basic, simple terms like angry, sad, or happy, rather than more nuanced or complex descriptions like betrayed, powerless, or joyful. Self-reflection, considering your part in the relationship, and sitting with your emotions can be painful, but this is where the real work is done. Encouraging concrete thinking. If you look closely, you'll see that a lot of the posts in attachment groups fall into what's called concrete thinking. The majority of posts tend to be about actual, immediate situations with questions about what to do. It's an urgent, pragmatic, troubleshooting mindset. But just like advice, concrete thinking can keep you stuck if it bypasses reflection and skill building. While being practical and seeking solutions is a good way to stay grounded and empowered, focusing on concrete situations and real-life procedures can keep you stuck, especially if you only seek help when there's a relationship crisis. And when there's not, it's business as usual and you're back on autopilot again. It can keep you in a loop of missing the forest for the trees. To give you an example, pretend you owned a bakery. If your daily thoughts were consumed with the daily operations of the bakery, baking bread, selling to customers, cleaning, and solving urgent problems, then you might miss the big picture things that could keep your business thriving, like why you decided to become a baker in the first place, experimenting with new recipes, or developing a solid marketing or business strategy. An overfocus on daily operations might also make you oblivious to tiny incremental changes, like your increasing debt or the rising cost of flour over the last 5 years. Running a successful bakery requires both concrete and abstract thinking, and so does healing. I found that a lot of members of these groups have a profound distaste for the abstract and theoretical, even to the point of being anti-intellectual, which I'll talk about in a minute. It's no surprise that people who have gone through adverse childhoods often have a kind of tunnel vision, a need to focus on short-term solutions and getting through each day. Some might call this survival mode. It hijacks our brains and convinces us that planning ahead and abstract thinking are luxuries we can't afford. So, what kind of abstract thinking am I talking about? Analyzing your own beliefs and thoughts. How did you get into this situation? What patterns have you noticed in yourself? What strategy are you going to use in this specific situation? Can you take the perspective of your partner, friend, or parent? And can you question your own assumptions? And perhaps the biggest one is considering intentions and motivations beneath behavior. And this is where Peter Fonagy comes in. Peter Fonagy was so inspired by the adult attachment interview that he began elaborating on the idea of mentalization, which he also called reflective function. It was clear that the capacity to understand behavior in terms of underlying mental states is what distinguished secure attachment from insecure attachment. Insecure people's reflective function collapsed when attachment was activated. Mentalization, or reflecting on the mental undercurrent of behavior, was a painful but crucial process that led to security. Now get this. Fonagy described insecure thinking with this concept of the teleological stance. A teleological stance is a primitive mode of functioning where internal mental states, thoughts, feelings, and intentions are only acknowledged if they are demonstrated through concrete physical actions and observable outcomes. This explains why there's a preoccupation with specific situations rather than general principles, why personal experience is treated as evidence, and why discussions around theory seem pedantic or irrelevant to the insecure attacher. And just to bring my point home, there are a couple of other models that show that concrete thinking is really not that impressive. In 1936, psychologist Jean Piaget introduced his 4 stages of development. Concrete thinking is level 3. Formal thinking, which is abstract thinking more or less, is the 4th and highest level. Since then, neo-Piagetians have suggested that there are actually 5 or 6 levels, and that these levels consist of post-formal thinking. And now let's talk about Maslow's hierarchy. You see the practical aspects of maintaining connection rank lower than self-actualization, things like self-development and self-awareness. In other words, post-formal abstract thinking. Healing requires becoming aware of our own mental schemas, reconsidering them, and coming to new conclusions. It's less about first-person thinking and more about third-person monitoring of ourselves. The word reflection means to think carefully and deeply about something. Thinking about pros and cons, the nature of emotion and perception, how you know what you know, and even how we're all connected. This is crucial work that should not be dismissed in favor of getting through today's problems. The best way to avoid drowning is to learn how to swim. Anti-Intellectualism. It's not just that these groups tend to avoid abstract thinking. What I noticed is an undeniable thread of anti-intellectualism running through these groups. First, educational and theoretical content don't seem to engage these groups very well. I did an analysis on 100 posts in a large Facebook group, and I divided posts by intent. Were they there to get something or to contribute something? I called them givers and takers. The givers were the ones offering educational content, sharing videos, and inspiring reflection. The takers were the posts soliciting feedback, opinions, or advice. Taker posts comprised 2/3 of all posts. Not only that, but they got roughly twice the reactions and a whopping 15 to 20 times as many comments. Now, some of this can probably be explained by the fact that takers are asking questions and expecting comments, but I suspect most of it has to do with the sensationalist nature of relationship posts compared to the usually dry quality of educational posts. Like a car crash, relationship posts draw attention. Meanwhile, Educational posts barely get a glance. Some of this is also a result of the algorithm, which I'll mention in a bit. But the result is that the people who are most serious about educating and serving end up getting discouraged and quit. Second, people just aren't that interested in theory. Again, this is probably where concrete thinking comes into play. Do a word search and you'll see that people rarely mention the founder of attachment theory himself, John Bowlby, or fundamental attachment theory concepts like the secure base. Little attention is given to childhood experiences, but virtually every post is about adult romantic relationships or dating advice. Third, devaluation of expertise. Attachment-focused Facebook groups tend to be peer support groups. People don't expect to find experts in these groups, and I think because of that, people actually end up driving experts away. There's a sense that no one cares who you are, how many degrees you have, or how many books you've read. They'd rather talk to someone who has self-diagnosed themselves with disorganized attachment than talk to someone who is an expert in disorganized attachment. And if you are educated, no one is going to tag you in a post for your opinion. The admins aren't going to give you an expert badge. You're still going to have to compete for recognition and attention in the comment sections, just like everybody else. But not only will you not get recognized, you may even get ridiculed or treated poorly. People might see you as a know-it-all. If you cite your sources, they might call that clickbait. If you try to get people to think, they might call that rage bait. And if they don't understand something you're saying, Dunning-Kruger syndrome will have them calling you an idiot. Fourth, I call this epistemic blindness. In these groups, there's a focus on personal stories and lived experiences. People rarely ask for research studies. People only want to hear what's worked for other group members, almost as if they were asking for local restaurant suggestions. Or they might only want to hear from a certain attachment style, as if people were perfectly self-aware and understood the mysteries of their own minds. This begs the question, how do we know what we know? The fancy word for this is epistemology. Insecurely attached people are uncomfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity, and they seek out black and white answers. They don't fully comprehend that reality is complex and nuanced, and that claims need to be carefully backed up with good evidence. The heavy reliance on anecdotal evidence in these groups implies there's no awareness of what constitutes weak or strong evidence, and no awareness that our attachment systems literally hide thoughts and feelings from our conscious awareness to protect us. The methods that are being used to acquire knowledge in these groups are often the opposite of the scientific method and critical thinking. Decades of research is ignored, while anecdotal and experiential evidence is normalized. Fifth, simple narratives and loose jargon. For groups that seem to hate theory and hair splitting, they also ironically engage in the misuse of psychological terminology. Words have been weaponized and stretched beyond their intended meanings. Words like narcissist, trauma, gaslighting, codependent, trigger, neurodivergent, etc. are cavalierly tossed around. When it comes to concepts, attachment is viewed exclusively through an oversimplified and often misunderstood social psychology lens. Concepts like love languages, the Myers-Briggs type indicator, enneagrams, astrology, and other pseudoscience are elevated to the same level as developmental psychology. Curiously, there's little mention of concepts like enmeshment, functional care, communication, de-escalation, or repair. Neglecting communication skills. That brings me to the fifth reason why attachment-focused groups might be keeping you stuck. People underestimate how crucial communication is to secure attachment. It is the most practical and most effective way to build security in yourself and your relationships. Learning how to calm down, how to use a soft start, learning to use I feel statements correctly, making requests instead of demands, apologizing, and forgiving. And yet, on Facebook, people regularly escalate conflict, shame and insult others, and group admins seem to prefer a hands-off approach to moderation if they're even around at all. So you're left with a social group where there's virtually no accountability and few people care about how they communicate with each other. How are you going to become more secure in that kind of environment? And let's be honest, this isn't that different from most Facebook groups, really, which brings me to my next point. The algorithm. One factor that supports poor communication, ignorance, and just emotional dysregulation in general is the algorithm. Facebook rewards emotionally charged posts. These can sometimes be contentious or polarizing. They attract rude and angry comments from people with an axe to grind. It's not uncommon for people to project past personal grievances onto strangers on the internet. I've done it too. Many social media algorithms favor discussion, posts that invite debate or ask questions, whether they're civil or not, over informative educational posting. If it gets comments and engagement, that's what the algorithm wants. So naturally, requests for advice will do better than a book quote. And a drag-out fight about whether or not avoidance are narcissists will do better than a thoughtful lecture about metacognition. And there will be people there who will take advantage of the algorithm and everyone's lack of self-awareness and self-control and post content for the sole purpose of monetization through engagement. I'm talking about content creators and bots. As a side note, I've personally tried to make my educational posts more engaging, but it's a tightrope. If it's too boring, people don't comment and my reach gets limited. If it's too edgy, people immediately accuse me of rage bait. I've definitely tried both extremes. Counterproductive nature. Lastly, let's talk about the counterproductive or self-sabotaging or shoot myself in the foot nature of these groups. Is it crazy to think that these attachment groups shouldn't be so focused on answering that one burning question about your partner or troubleshooting today's urgent relationship crisis? Did we not join these groups with the goal of becoming secure and doing the work that requires? Instead, it seems like these groups are doing the opposite of what they're meant to do. The posts on how to heal your anxious attachment fall to the bottom. Drama rises to the top, and people end up stuck in contentious flame wars at worst, or feeble-minded attachment conversations at best. You'd think groups like this would welcome educated, well-read people with open arms, but instead, they create an environment that repels them. An environment where insightful posts are ignored, where intellectual conversations are avoided, where half the members are anonymous, where comments are a dime a dozen, and where people don't say thank you very often. So, what explains all this? Well, I think the biggest factor here is probably a preoccupied state of mind. Groups like this disproportionately attract people with preoccupied attachment. There's the overdependence on others, the desire to be rescued and to rescue others. There's the preoccupation with suffering and with romantic partners. Preoccupied people's distinctive defensive processes keep them skewed towards emotion, intuition, vagueness, and experience at the expense of logical clarity, analysis, and abstraction. And we know preoccupied people have a penchant for jargon, terminology, and canned speech. Of course, all attachment patterns can engage in shaming, coercion, lack of collaborative dialogue, and conflict escalation. So, what can we do about it? Well, here are my suggestions for how to move forward. And I just want to say, the more of a collective effort this is, the more effective it can be. Number one, avoid asking or giving advice. I know that can be really hard. It's hard to think outside the box, but please try to challenge yourself. Instead of offering advice, ask careful questions that inspire reflection. Help people figure out their own path. Don't let people outsource their thinking to you. Encourage people to become more resourceful and to go out and make friends in real life. It's okay to not give people certainty when there is no certainty. Besides, people need more than advice, and what they might actually need more than anything is emotional support, to know someone sees how they feel and is there for them. Number two, encourage people to look inward. When people ask about their partners or other attachment styles, redirect them with gentle questions to their own experience, their feelings, their thoughts, and their beliefs. Help them explore the motivations and intentions of their own behavior. Number three, encourage big picture thinking. People get stuck in the weeds. Help them reflect on their own motivations, beliefs, and patterns, and encourage them to build skills like self-regulation and mindfulness. Number four, encourage reading and skepticism. Encourage critical thinking. Have some intellectual conversations. Bring up Bowlby and Ainsworth. Share content from people with PhDs and not just TikTok influencers. 5, encourage healthy communication. Nonviolent communication, or NVC, is a really great framework for that. Encourage people to avoid blame and instead make factual observations, use I feel statements, encourage them to get in touch with their needs, and to make requests instead of demands. 6, if you're an admin or moderator, enforce the rules, manage your group, support educational content by engaging with it, and help support the other things I just mentioned. That's it for today. I'd love to hear your comments. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and as usual, see you next time.